Hi, and thanks for checking in again. So this week, what showed up earlier was people contacting me because they were feeling tired or something wasn't quite right, something wasn't sitting okay in the gut, or they felt all they wanted to do was sleep through the tiredness. And given everything that's going on, it's quite understandable. The energies are quite heavy at the moment. And unless one is incredibly centered, this can really affect oneself. So it's not always personal. These energies are around, and we tend to think these things are personal. The only reason I know they're not personal is because so many people are feeling them, and I am lucky enough to be in contact with people so that I realize something's going on. It's not actually personal. So sometimes it can be as simple as you're overworking, you've changed your routine, you need some protein. But on the other hand, it's even without watching the news or tuning into what's going on, there's a general energy around at the moment, and partly because it's spring, and apparently according to the Vedic, spring is a heavy month because we're coming out of winter, and the earth and water are meeting, and it's quite a heavy energy, which of course will lighten up through to summer, where we get all sorts of magical dreams and hopefully implement some of them. So the title today is, for this weekend or for the time that we're in, came up as manifesting, and to do with death, and through death, life. So some literally had connections to death this time, or the possibility of that happening, and it brought up that notion for them to explore death, which they were feeling quite awkward about. So in exploring it, we again went back to what I spoke about initially, which is there is no separation. We are in heaven. We are separating ourselves from that. And the many veils, these veils we place upon ourselves, or we have believed them and we haven't removed them yet. And if we don't remove them, we cannot see. So in exploring how we as a collective manifest, and the many veils we collectively hold, even those aren't really holding together. So we're to some extent in uncharted waters. We're not as secure as we used to be, say, in the 80s, 90s, and where the train tracks were quite solid and we could plan where we're going as long as we put in, or whatever it was that we were interested in and loved to do. That is still the same, but the tracks aren't there anymore. We're now more in this being sovereign in our manifesting and being very clear about who we are and what the veils are, and to take veils off from what others have said or what we believe. And that's a lot of work to remove those. So interestingly, following on from that, a being came, and the analogy was very fitting as a follow-on, because it was the equivalent of a block of ice, if I use the analogy, a block of ice melting and still feeling the water that the ice had melted into. And no matter how much you thought or wondered or whatever, that could not come back again. So part of that is sometimes when we have lived in fear and we've had circumstances that were not preferable, when things change, we wonder whether the bad old times can come back. So it's got many facets to it, that our mind is working through situations to form the new. It's equivalent to what we know about the caterpillar, because the caterpillar literally goes to liquid, and it goes through the dark night of the soul, and it fights for its dear life to stay as a caterpillar, and it loses. So in the same way, we can fight for that things stay the same, that we are right, that others are wrong, and they shouldn't have done that, or they shouldn't have thought it, or what do they think? And we all make it up in our mind. So, but how we make it up in our mind is how we manifest whether we're in heaven or not in heaven. And so working with it and seeing that things are changing, and in the process of it changing, we are the sovereigns, that in our simple choices on a daily basis of being who we prefer to be, rather than coming from a judgment of what we think others are or are not, we're going to end up in a place that is preferable. So that's very much the theme that came up. I mean, it was mentioned the story of the Japanese soldiers who ran away and hid in the forests and learned to live there by themselves and survived. And when they were eventually found, they had not yet heard that the war was over. So in their mind, the war was still going on. So it'd be good to reflect to sort of see what wars are still going on inside of you that can actually stop, because they're created in our mind, and we too can go through the dark night of the soul and become the butterflies, because that process is well and truly happening. So the essences that came up were 5 corners, and the other one was mountain devil. I'll read you 5 corners. 5 corners is that plant that represents the man with the head, 2 arms, 2 legs, the five aspects. And it says here that this essence allows the life force to flow through these 5 centers. When this happens, a person feels good and strong in themselves. They feel their own love and beauty. The essence resolves low self-esteem, lack of confidence, and diminished self-love. In the negative mode, the person will appear crushed and held in. So the negative conditions: low self-esteem, dislike of self, crushed, held in personality, and colourless. The positive is love and acceptance of self, celebration of one's own beauty, and joyousness. The other essence, as mentioned, was mountain devil. And mountain devil is more that aspect that relates to hostility, anger, holding grudges, suspiciousness. And the positive is unconditional love, happiness, healthy boundaries, and forgiveness. So it is for people who tend to be suspicious of others. Mountain devil helps to develop unconditional love and acceptance. It helps one express anger in a healthy way and so develop safe boundaries. This may open the way to forgiveness. And an important part of that is to not blame. To not blame means to be sovereign. When you're sovereign, you take actions in relation to it. You may need to sit at a round table with others and discuss how things are really sitting in a way that comes from a wanting to sort things out, wanting to get clear about where they're at, where you're at, and not with a judgment, but as a revealing of what's going on and what choices we can make from that, because then we can move forward and manifest without blame what we can do about it. So in that way, we can speak to others in a way that we would like to speak to ourselves, to explain to ourselves that situation. How would you explain it to yourself? And that in that same way, explain it to others. And then in that process, we weave together or go our own way to weave the fabric in a place where we want to play, in a joyous situation. So part of that actually also came to breath and the ability to breathe deeply, and to do that several times and to find that relaxed space. Because when we're calm, we can feel that unconditional love, and we can feel the absolute okayness of ourselves and the sovereign aspects of ourselves, which we really are going to grow stronger and stronger in, because the less that is solid, the more we take up for ourselves to take charge of. So go well with that, and I'll catch you next week. Much love.